Hello and welcome to the latest in our series of video lessons about Irish history. What we're going to be looking at in today's video is the rise of Fianna Fáil in government from 1932 to 1939 and how they consolidated both Irish independence and Irish democracy after taking power from Cumann na Gael from 1933 to 1932. Now, how we're going to be looking at that were through the achievements of the Fianna Fáil government in changing the treaty, the economy and the law and order. Let's take a deep dive, shall we? So, one of the junior certificate questions is discuss the main achievements of the first Fianna Fáil government and how would you do this? Well, above all else, the most important thing that they did was that they changed the treaty. The leader of Fianna Fáil was Eamon de Valera. As soon as he came to power, he began to change the treaty. The Statute of Westminster allowed him to get rid of the oath of loyalty, which was the oath of allegiance to the king. They had frozen out the Governor General James McNeill to make him insignificant. He was so undermined by the actions of the Fianna Fáil government that he resigned, and this office was later abolished. Also, the king was removed as the head of the Irish Free State, and the Dáil agreed to this in 1936. Now, the 1937 Constitution and Bunreacht na hÉireann is just as important. As a result of all these changes, De Valera decided to introduce a new constitution in 1937 to improve on the 1923 Constitution, which was based off the Anglo-Irish Treaty. Some of its main terms were as follows. The Irish Free State was named Ireland. In this case, in Irish, it was Éire. The head of the state was to be a president who was to be elected for 7 years. The head of the government was to be called the Taoiseach. So essentially what it meant was that Ireland would now, as a republic in all but name, would be a democracy with both a prime minister and a president. Articles 2 and 3, though, would prove to be a bit more controversial, as they claim control over the whole island. And not just the 26 counties, which of course angered Unionists in Northern Ireland who saw it as a threat to their state's existence. To the economy, the Irish government collected land annuities from farmers and paid them to Britain. These land annuities were something that was around since the late 1800s, when the British government loaned money to Irish tenants to buy their farms. The land annuities were then annual repayments of these loans by the Irish to the British. However, De Valera kept the money to invest in Irish industries. This resulted in a trade war between Britain and the Free State, which was called the Economic War. The British put a tariff, or a tax, of 20% on Irish cattle exports. This had a disastrous effect on Irish agriculture as cattle exports fell. De Valera retaliated, though, by putting a 5% tariff on imports from Britain. The Anglo-Irish Agreement ended the Economic War in 1938. And its terms were, of course, that the land annuities were abolished and the Irish government had to make a one-off payment of £10 million, which you'll see coming up on your screen there. Both governments also reduced their tariffs, and most importantly for Ireland, knowing what we know now, is that the treaty ports of Cove, Bearhaven and Lough Swilly were given back to the Free State. It was obviously important as it allowed the Free State to stay neutral in World War II. As for its economic policy, though, Fianna Fáil's economic policy was to get the Free State to produce its own goods instead of depending on imports. To do this, it put tariffs on foreign imports to make them more expensive than Irish goods. This is called protectionism. It allowed Irish industry to develop, and this policy was successful as the number of workers in industry rose from around 111,000 in 1931 to 166,000 by 1938. Fianna Fáil also provided for the poor by giving unemployment assistance. Pensions were provided for widows and those with disability. Also, 100,000 houses were built for those living in slums like those in Dublin. So De Valera had kept the election promises that they put forward in 1932. Now, one of the problems, though, was the rise of the blue shirts and the rise of fascism all across Europe. It's important to note that leaders like Mussolini and Hitler were praised in the 1930s for rebuilding their countries and rebuilding their economies, and this was seen as fascism. A support of fascism was called a fascist, and these were people who wanted strong rulers who ran the country and that there were no elections, so therefore democracy would be abolished. But across the press and across the media in the 1930s, this was seen as a much greater alternative and, in fact, the only way to fight communism. So, when Fianna Fáil entered the government, they released all IRA prisoners from jail. The IRA then began to attack Cumann na Gael meetings in revenge for imprisoning them. The ACA, or the Army Comrades Association, was set up by ex-members of the Free State Army to provide protection at these meetings. After riots between the ACA and the IRA, though, De Valera sacked the Garda Commissioner, Owner Duffy, in 1933 as De Valera felt he wasn't doing enough to stop this public disorder. Ono Duffy then became the leader of the ACA, and you can see him here on the right hand side of your screen inspecting the blue shirts in military formation. They changed their name to the National Guard, and he organised them into a fascist-style organisation, and they adopted the fascist salute. They were called the Blue Shirts due to their uniform. Now, in August 1933, O'Duffy organised a march in Dublin, 10 years after the March on Rome. Now, De Valera was afraid that there would be an attempt to overthrow his government, like Mussolini in Rome, and therefore banned the march. He outlawed the Blue Shirts. But De Valera didn't take any steps against the IRA. As a result, Cosgrave was afraid that De Valera was going to establish a dictatorship. A dictatorship is a form of government where all the power lies in the hands of one person. So, Cosgrave decided to join with O'Duffy to stop this happening. In 1933, Cum na Gael united with the National Guard to form Fine Gael. O'Duffy was appointed leader. He was totally unsuited to the role and the leadership of a political party. He allowed the Blue Shirts to attack the Gardaí and threatened to invade Northern Ireland. In 1934, Fine Gael voted to sack O'Duffy and elected Cosgrave as their leader again. Now, with the IRA though, the IRA still felt that De Valera was not making enough progress towards a 32-county republic. De Valera was forced to outlaw the IRA after it committed several murders. So in 1939, the IRA started a bombing campaign in Britain that killed 5 people. In response, De Valera introduced a law against the IRA called the Offences Against the State Act. That's all for today's video. Thanks for listening. We'll be back again soon with more lessons on Irish history. Talk to you later. Goodbye.